So I have to ask you, just because we mentioned the term social justice, I'm really curious because anytime you seem like someone who would have an interesting swing on this. So when it comes to, let's go with social justice, just I'm curious to your specific opinion. Is social justice in a society, take everything you know about history and the whole thing, is the proper way of fixing or going about social justice, is that something that's more like, and I'll throw two crazy terms out, but I'll explain what I mean.
Okay.
Is it, in your opinion, more like time or temperature? And you'll love this one, John. Here's what I mean. Here's what I mean. When you think of temperature, right, and people's opinions, if I'm cold and you're hot, it's not that I'm right and you're wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's that I'm cold and you're hot.
Right.
We're both right.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to time, if it's 1 p.m. and I say it's 2, then I'm wrong.
Right.
So when it comes to social justice, in your opinion, do you think it's an issue of temperature or time? Meaning, if your opinion to handle it is X and my opinion to go about social justice is Y, are we both right? Or is it like time where there's only one right and the others have to be wrong?
That's a great analogy. I think it's more temperature, and here's why. Because it's very subjective, and I could be saying it's really cold in here, and you could be saying, no, it's hot in here. And then we can start arguing and planting our heels in, and you being like, no, this is what the temperature is. This is hot. And I could be like, no, this temperature means it's cold. I think 65 degrees is cold. And you're like, no, 65 degrees is warm. You shouldn't need a jacket. Take off your jacket. And I'm like, no, you put on your jacket. And it gets more and more heated in that way.
And historically, this room has only been at 65 degrees. So really,
we know nothing else. Yes.
Yeah. So I think temperature is probably a lot more accurate in terms of that, because people will have, people look at one thing and they'll interpret it a little differently. Neither one is necessarily correct nor incorrect either, but people will have kind of their belief about it. And the more you're being told you're wrong, the more you're going to dig your heels in and say you're correct.
That I agree with you. So if it is a problem of temperature, meaning we're both right, how do you go about bringing people on board and living the way you think people should live in a society, if I'm right too?
Well, a lot of it is, being able to find some way of really reaching people and getting people to really, believe you. And you have to have a certain type of charisma. You have to have a certain type of presence and be able to reach the right type of audience. So people who, people who are able to reach a very large group of people to believe something ridiculous, for instance, in a way, that is very smart to do. They are very smart people to be able to do that in order to know how to rile up people and get people to follow a certain belief, such as flat earthers, for instance. Whoever comes up with that idea, whether or not they actually believed it, they were smart enough to know exactly how to build followers. And so, where was I going with this?
No, we're talking about the whole temperature, how you go about a society where
is there a way to bring people on board?
If we're all right.
You have to be very good at communication. You have to be able to know how to use social media to your advantage. Like, here's the thing. Again, not to get too political, but President Trump, for instance, when he's kind of going about saying, like, these people are terrible, those people are terrible, this, and this, he is very, very good at what he does. He knows exactly who he's speaking to. He knows exactly what to say. He knows who he's appealing to. And frankly, I hate to admit it, he is brilliant at that.
You know what, Rebecca? I give you a lot of credit for clearly not being on the Trump train and being able to give him credit where it's due. I give you a lot of credit for being able to do that. Hats off to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
This is, as sometimes I say, as a historian, this is kind of what we need to do. I've got my two sides. I've got my, this is my opinion and I'm correct. And then I'm like, historian Becca, where I'm like, no, well, this is how the reality of how things work and blah, 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 blah. So I do my best. Thank you.
I love it. Do you have any more history questions?
There's so many, because I know that historians aren't, say, future predictors, but if there's anything you've specifically learned about, through your studies of piracy and the beginning of the era of exploration and expansion by the Europeans and colonization and such, is there anything that that somewhere in the world is driving toward in exactly the same way as something you've already studied?
Yes. And this is a theory I present to my classes that I learned from a professor that I think is completely correct. Everyone throughout human history that has always existed and exists today in terms of ruling and society, all have at least one, two, or three of these three golds: God, gold, and glory. So those are the three main drives of absolutely everything, every empire, every government, every leader. And when I'm saying that, when I say God, meaning that they want to be seen as like the ultimate ruler, the best leader. Gold, they want to be the wealthiest and most powerful. Glory, they want to be remembered in a very specific way.
So the most egocentric one possible.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what it is. That's what it is. People, leaders are very egocentric. They want to, put their stamp in history, but really it's like all about whether it's for the country or whether it's for themselves, to gain as much of this wealth and glory and infamy as absolute possible. And this is what drives every civilization. Every single civilization, including up to today, it's one of those three, if not all three.
So where are we going with that? What's the next thing that happens?
Ugh.
In terms of how history repeats
Just
itself?
the tragedy of the commons, and we're
Well,
looking at the
the next
Soviet
generation, the women will run the show.
We're looking at the Soviet reunion over here. We're looking at China taking all of Asia and expanding and collapsing again, or
Well,
what are we looking at? What are you telling me?
Here's I think it could go one of two ways, and it'll probably go both ways. In terms of kind of a negative way, is we're starting to see more censorship. We're starting to see, a lot more evidence of political dishonesty and government corruption, which frankly has always existed, but it's just very present now thanks to all the information we have access to. But we're seeing a lot of censorship. We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing more ideas of autocracy. We're seeing anti-immigration, more racism. However, on the same token, because of all this information we have, we've got more people rallying against all of this corruption and all of this social injustice than we've ever seen before in a much more organized way because the information getting out there. So we're and this is why I think there's such a split right now, is because the information people are getting versus the information that they want. So and so I think that's kind of where we're kind of headed. I think this split, I don't think it's going to end anytime soon.
Sure.
Like, I really don't.
It just intensify, probably.
I think it's just going to intensify. Like,
So we're ripping each other apart over things that are.
I mean, we are. I keep telling
basic
some of
differences of opinion over here.
my friends in the UK, sometimes, they're like, what is going on over there? Although they haven't asked me that recently because they've had a lot of stuff going on over there. But
we asked them the same. What is going on?
Yeah. And
how's Australia now?
What's happening there?
Yes, what's happening anywhere? But they'll ask, and I'm like, we are pretty much in a culture war right now. And I think it's going to keep going for a while. I don't know when it's going to change, but we've got a lot of stuff coming our way, and we're not prepared for it.
Is it almost too easy to take up a cause and bring yourself some followers? I mean, before it was difficult. You had to be a master of social media, which wasn't necessarily an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But is it easier now? And therefore, do we have just like a ridiculous number of causes and bandwagoning a culture itself even?
It's really easy nowadays, especially with different types of social media. For instance, TikTok, which is the most downloaded app of any app ever created. I think there's almost 2 billion people who have TikTok.
Smokes.
Yeah.
Is it Chinese?
Yeah, it was. I don't know if it still is, but it was. And
brilliant. TikTok, it's just short stuff.
Yeah, it's really like the longest video you can do on there is 3 minutes long.
Basically Twitter for video.
People don't have any patience.
No, they don't. In fact, they say the videos get the most views right now are 7 seconds long. Like, and so people are getting, I hear so many people saying, and I'm guilty of this because I'm on TikTok. I deliver a pirate fact every day. Like, that's
plug yourself. What's your TikTok?
So my TikTok handle is Pirate Beckalex, Beckalex.
Okay.
It's like my first and middle name combined. And so I do like a daily pirate fact, and there's lots of good stuff on sites like this, people who genuinely want to educate, historians and doctors and teachers, nurses, scientists, etc. But then you also have people who could be anybody are saying like, oh, if you have this mild social quirk, you might have this type of mental illness, or if this is happening, it means this. You don't know where the information's coming from. It's happening very quickly. And, people will say, oh, I saw a TikTok where someone said this and it's absolutely true. And it's like, is it? Did you read about it or watch a 7-second video? Like, so that's the thing. We have all this information, but at the same time, anybody could be delivering any type of information for specific audiences. And if you're lucky, it takes off and you go viral, and then you're able to really start getting your information out there really far and wide.
Why do people take that information so readily? Why are they so ready to hear something, whether it's true or false?
A lot of it, I think, comes from, again, this is outside my expertise here, but I think a lot of people kind of generally always go in with some sort of information bias. And when they find something that really, when you find something that really fascinates you, it's because you already have kind of a belief in it or kind of an interest in it at the very least.
Or even an interest to believe.
Yes, or an interest to believe it. So that's why you're going to have some people who are going to be a lot more passionate about a certain type of information than another. This is why we have, today with COVID, for example, you have people who are anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers saying that it's all a hoax, blah, 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 because these are people who are probably already kind of like suspicious of government overreach, probably were suspicious of vaccines in general, probably didn't know anyone who got COVID, or if they did get COVID, weren't that sick. So that's the information they're looking for versus people who are like, no, I trust the science. No, I've been vaccinated. I believe in the vaccines. I've seen people get sick from COVID, or I'm paying attention to news stories of people getting sick from COVID. But that's because those groups are looking for that information.
Fully agree with that.
Yeah, even you have the phrase, I trust the science. And I think someone who, quote, doesn't trust the science is also going to say, I trust the science. It's just not yours. Or they say, oh, I trust science and not scientists. And there's like a buzz, there's like a buzz for everyone. It
exactly.
feels like, right?
We as humans, we totally see what we're looking for.
Yeah.
100%. There's no denying that. If I told you look for gray in this room, you'd look to this side. And if I said look for red, you'd look to that side.
Right.
So how do we get on the same page? There has to be a way, Professor. Put us on the same page.
It's never gonna happen.
Or is the whole point of what makes a society function is the fact that there's 2 or 3 or 4
we're not on the same
that we're
page.
not on the same. It would be boring if we're on the same page.
The thing is like
we can contain the information somewhere in the middle, right?
Nothing would get done.
Exactly. If the thing is, here's the problem. It's like, oh my God, society's so divided. But the thing is, social divisions are what creates some progress in a way. We would never have social change if it weren't for groups of dissenters who are like, hey, this is incorrect and we need to make changes.
It's very John Locke, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. In any direction. And that is what actually helps society grow and change. It's all part of, it could fit into many different categories of the 7 markers of civilization. And ideas can fit into technology because what creates technology? An idea to change something for what they think is the better. And so when you have differences in society, you're going to help create a lot of different types of social progress. So, and we see this in all kinds of areas, whether or not we like it, we are, something is always going to be progressing. And we can't have that if everybody's on the same page, because let's be real. What is the point of any of us, coming on a podcast? You create a podcast because you want to get information out there. If everyone, is on the same page about anything, nothing would be interesting.
Right.
It'd just be boring.
Look at her. She just used this to prove her point.
Oh, the professor.
That's a smart woman.
Oh, the
right
professor
there.
is among us.
That's a smart woman.